So now we are going to look at complex sentences. Complex sentences join independent clauses, or complete sentences, with dependent clauses. Dependent clauses depend on independent clauses to be complete. A dependent clause cannot be by itself. This is where a lot of students run into trouble because they think a dependent clause is a complete sentence. So we're going to look at these using two different techniques, so number 4 and number 5, with subordinating conjunctions. Now there is an acronym to help you with remembering subordinating conjunctions, but it's kind of a weird one. So it is called a WUBIS, although, after, as, when, while, until, before, because, if, since. Now I can guarantee you use the majority of these words every single day, whether in written expression or in verbal expression. So this is definitely, of all the structures, one you really need to make sure that you understand. So there are two different types of formulas. The first one, the one on top, is a dependent clause with a comma and then an independent clause. Now you use the subordinating conjunctions at the start of the dependent. So your subordinating conjunction will be right here. And then on the next one, you start with the independent clause, you put your subordinating conjunction, and then you have your dependent clause. Keep in mind the dependent clause cannot stand by itself. It needs to be with that independent clause. So let's take a look at some examples. And you'll see that I've actually done the same two sentences. I've just flipped them around. So you can see that these are actually fairly similar, okay? So in the first one, the dependent clause, comma, independent clause, you start with one of the WUBIS words, although, after, as, when, while, until, before, because, if, since. So let's take a look. Because I overslept, comma, I was late for class. So this is the dependent clause. If I just said because I overslept, it is not a complete sentence. And then I was late for class is the independent clause. Super key is that comma. Okay. Although I like the dark, that is our dependent clause, comma, it can be really scary. That's our independent clause. In each of these, we have although and because. Those are our WUBIS words. Now the trick here is, where do you put the comma? The thing that I tell students is, until you get the hang of it, this is where you can actually use that breath pause to help you. If I were to say, when I went to the store, I ran into an old friend. That pause is where you'd place that comma. When I went to the store, I ran into an old friend. After soccer practice, we went for McDonald's. After soccer practice, comma, we went for McDonald's. So that brief pause is where you'll place the comma. So until you've started really practicing this and actually trying this in your writing, it will take a while before you internalize where exactly that comma is going to go. Because some sentences, depending on how complex they are, can be difficult. Now, on the opposite side, we have the ICDC. Okay, independent clause and dependent clause. There is no punctuation mark separating the two here. So I should not see a comma. Now what I did is I flipped the sentences around. I was late for class because I overslept. Now this is super important. Because is part of that dependent clause. Because I overslept is the dependent clause. Okay. If I were to eliminate that dependent clause, what's left has to be complete. I was late for class. That's the independent clause. You will notice I changed some of the pronoun usage down here just to kind of clarify the sentence. The dark can be really scary, although I like it. So although, that is our WUBIS word. So although I like it is the dependent clause. And the dark can be really scary is the independent clause. If I said the dark can be really scary, that is a complete sentence. Okay, so for either of these things, you can really just flip it around. So, does my head look big in this? Here is your example sentence. When she gets to her second cigarette, comma, I can't contain myself any longer. All right, so when is our WUBIS word. When she gets to her second cigarette is the dependent clause. And then I can't contain myself any longer is the independent clause. Now I should easily be able to flip the sentence. I can't contain myself any longer when she gets to her second cigarette. Still makes perfect sense. And then for the independent dependent clause, looking at 13 reasons why. It feels like we've driven the same road multiple times since leaving Rosie's. All right, since is my awubis word. Since leaving Rosie's is the dependent clause. It feels like we've driven the same road multiple times as the independent clause. Now I should be able to flip it. Since leaving Rosie's, comma, it feels like we've driven the same road multiple times. So you'll see that with these particular structures, the subordinating conjunctions, they're super easy just to kind of flip around. But remember, you want to make sure you are paying attention for these words. Okay? Yes, you can start sentences with the word because. All right? I know sometimes teachers will say, no, don't do that. But the fact is that you can. You just have to make sure you have the punctuation in the correct spot. So if you have any of the grammar stuff at all that you need to memorize, this is the one I would suggest because this is the one you are going to use most often in your writing, and this will be the technique that helps to improve your writing the most as well.